Chapter 14 in the book of Genesis today is where we're going to be. Now, chapter 14 is one of those chapters where there's a lot of strange names. I know you're probably thinking, well, with a name like Apple, who are you to talk? You know. But there are some names that are very difficult to pronounce in chapter 14. But the basic story, I'll get into that in just a little bit. But the first 13 verses, I'm just going to read really quickly to you. And then we're going to talk about the rest of the chapter. But in the first 13 verses, and it says in verse 1, "And it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, the king of Shinar, Arioch, the king of Elazar, and Chedorlaomer is a name you're going to have to remember, the king of Elam, and Tidal, the king of nations, that they made war with Berah, the king of Sodom, and Birsha, the king of Gomorrah, Shenab, the king of Admah, and Shemeber, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar." Verse 3 says, all of these joined together in the valley of Siddim. In other words, the Salt Sea. 12 years they served Chedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. In the 14th year, Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him came and attacked the Rephaim in Ashtaroth, in Karnaim, the Zunim in Ham, and Emim in Shaveh, Kiriathim, and the Horites in their mountain of Seir, as far as El Paran, which is there by the wilderness. Verse 7 says, "Then they turned back and came to En Mishpat," that is Kadesh, "and attacked all of the country of the Amalekites and also the Amorites who dwelt in Hazazon Tamar." Verse 8, "And the kings of Sodom, and the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela," that is Zoar, "went out and joined together in battle in the valley of Siddim against Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam, Tidal, king of nations, Amraphel, the king of Shinar, Arioch, the king of Elazar, 4 kings against 5. Now the valley of Siddim was full of asphalt pits. And the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah, some fell there. They fled, but some fell there, and the remainder fled to the mountains." Verse 11, "Then they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their provisions, and they went their way. They also took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, with his goods, and departed. Then one who had escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre the Amorite, the brother of Eshcol and the brother of Aner. And they were allies with Abram." Now, let's pause right there. We're going to continue in a little bit. But now, if your eyes are crossed and you can't remember any of those names and they sound so strange, you're not alone. You're not alone. I think every pastor's nightmare is to come into a chapter like this and say, how do you say those names? And you know that you're going to get them wrong. You can study for weeks and you're still going to get a few of them wrong because someone else that you're studying, they say pronounce it like this and they were wrong. Okay, and even some of the modern Hebrew speakers today might not know how to pronounce those words until you look at the nikodot, or the vowel pointings in the Torah or in the Bible. And you look at it, then it tells you how to pronounce those, right? But I think the smarter thing to do is just come to this and just say, 4 kings went to war with 5 other kings. Now let's skip to verse 14. Okay, that's an easier thing to do. And so kind of that's what we're doing today, because honestly, I don't think I could pronounce them twice the same way. Not that anyone here would notice, but You know what I mean? So, anyway, let's look at verse 14. It says, now when Abram, now who is Abram? He's Abraham. God later is going to change his name to Abraham. Right now, Abram means exalted father. Av in Hebrew is father. If you see a B and a V in your English Bible, you can know that Ab can also be pronounced as Av in Hebrew, because the B and the V are the same letter. There's just a tiny little dot there known as a dagesh, okay, that means the difference between the V sound and the B sound. So many times in the Bible, if you see something that's pronounced Ab, it's pronounced Av in Hebrew. And Av means father. You say, well, wait a minute, I thought Abba meant father. Well, sort of. Abba really means dad or daddy. It's a more close type term. It's like my daughters. So if they're talking about me to their friends, they might say, well, my father is in Israel. But if they're talking to me, it's Abba, it's daddy, you see. So it's a closer term. Av is a formal term for father. Okay? Well, Abraham and Avram are ways of saying father and then followed by an adjective that describes him. Avram means exalted father. Ram is loud or high or exalted, if you will, I guess, you know. So in the Bible, it's exalted father. Well, see, that's a problem because Avram didn't have any children. Here he is, he's getting to be a pretty old guy. He's probably even older than me. And he doesn't have any children. So he comes up to somebody in a new place where he's traveling to. And they say, well, what's your name? And he goes, Avram. And he goes, oh, where's your children? He goes, well, actually, I don't have any children. But your name is Exalted Father. What's going on? Well, we can't have children. Okay? But later, he will be called Avraham, which is father of a multitude. Okay? And God is going to change his state to where he doesn't have any children, even though they cannot physically have any children. It's impossible in the eyes of man. He's going to change things miraculously, and Abraham is going to become the father of a nation that will be beyond number. God said, more than the sands of the sea, more than the stars of the heaven. I'm going to multiply your descendants, and in you all the families, kol hamishpachot la'olam, all the families of the earth will be blessed. And I will bless those that bless you, and I will curse those that curse you. That's what he says in chapter 3, or chapter 12, verse 3. So, but right now he's called Avram. And verse 14 takes up and says, now when Avram heard that his brother was taken captive, he's speaking about Lot. But Lot was really his brother's son, in other words, Avram's nephew, but he came from the same bloodline, from the same family tree. So he's called here his brother. He says, when he heard that his brother, Lot, was taken captive, he armed 318 trained servants who were born in his own house, and he went to pursue them as far as Dan. And he divided his forces against them by night, it says in verse 15, and he and his servants attacked them and pursued them as far as Hobah, which is on the north of Damascus. And so he brought back all the goods, and he brought back his brother Lot, and the goods as well as the women and the people. And the king of Sodom went out to meet him at the valley of Shaveh, that is the king's valley, after his return from the defeat of Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him. Verse 18. This is a short chapter. Let's just finish up. Then, you say it as Melchizedek, but let's just say Melchizedek, okay? Melchizedek, the king of Salem, brought out bread and water. He was the priest of God Most High. And he blessed him, and he said, "Blessed be Abram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand." And then he gave him a tithe of all. It continues in verse 21. It says, "Now the king of Sodom said to Abram, 'Give me the persons and take the goods for yourself.' But Abram said to the king of Sodom, 'I have raised my hand to the Lord God Most High, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will take nothing from a thread of a sandal strap, and that I will not take anything that is yours, lest you should say, I have made Abram rich, except only what the young men have eaten, and the portion of the men who went with me, Aner, Eshcol, Mamre, let them take their portion.'" Now, that's the whole chapter. I just read to you the whole chapter. Now we're going to talk about these things. I think in my understanding of this, I look at this chapter after we've gone through the first 13 chapters now in HaSefer Bereshit, the book of Genesis, and we look at this and we go, what in the world does all of that mean? All of those strange names, all of those strange places, and it's just recording a war, and somebody takes some people and somebody takes some things that were in these cities, and they go off, and Abram pursues them and rescues his nephew, and on the way back this strange guy named Melchizedek just comes out and offers a blessing to Abram. What does all this mean? I think that I would call this the mystery chapter. It's the mystery chapter. And if you think about it, the basic two things that it's talking about is this battle and Abram trying to get Lot back and the rest of his family, but then also the meeting with Melchizedek. But sometimes I think that especially as pastors and especially as Bible students, we tend to go through things one chapter at a time. You know what I mean? Okay, we're reading this today, we're studying this today. What is the message in this chapter? What is the message that God is really bringing to us in this chapter? And for sure, there are messages in every chapter that can apply to your life. There's messages in every chapter that teach us about the heart of God, about what God is trying to teach us as He makes us into people after His own heart. But also in this chapter, the thing that struck me is if you zoom out a little bit, if you got to go back away a little bit and you look at the whole flow of things from chapter 12, 13, and now 14, I think that there's even a bigger story there. And I think that we're looking at the making of a man of faith. We're looking at the making of a man of faith in Abram, who later will become Abraham. You say, well, what do you mean by that? Simply this. Abram, in chapter 12, it was recorded that he left the land that he was called to, Canaan, and he went down to Egypt because there was a famine in Canaan. That's what it says in chapter 12. But then on the way down to Egypt, he told his wife to lie and to tell the guards and Paro, or Pharaoh's people, that she was his sister, so that they would not kill him to get to her because she was very beautiful. So he left the place that he was called. He went to a place where he was not called because apparently he thought that he was going to perish where God had called him. So if you think about it, he started as a man of faith by leaving Ur of the Chaldeans to go to Canaan, to the place where God had called him. But then he went away from that faith and he started thinking with the natural mind, oh, it's a famine. I might perish. You see, he wasn't thinking that, well, wait a minute, God called me here. He's going to take care of me here. And instead he went down to Mitzrayim, Egypt, and he tried to live there. And on the way, he tried to protect himself. He said, now you tell them you're my sister so they won't kill me to get to you. He's trying to protect himself, both in going to a place that he thinks will have enough food, and also protect himself from people who might want to get to his wife and would try to kill him to get to her. He's trying to protect himself. That's not faith. That's not trusting in God to provide for the food. That's not trusting in God to be his defense and his shield and his protector. So chapter 12 was a story about a man who started in faith, who's now taking a step back into his natural understanding. He's taking a step back out of faith, and now he's thinking again as things would be thought by a man, in a carnal mind, in a natural mind, without considering that God is going to care for him and take care of him. Chapter 12. See, chapter 13, we see a completely different guy. Chapter 13, we see a guy who is now, he comes to Lot and he says, listen, I've noticed that your servants are quarreling, they're arguing with my servants. There's not enough pasture here for your flocks and my flocks. So I'll tell you what, you choose which direction you want to go. Whatever you want is fine with me. This is what he tells his nephew Lot. He tells Lot, he says, if you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go the other way to the left. It doesn't matter to me. זה לא חשוב לי. Okay, it's not important to me. You choose whichever one you want. I'll do the opposite. Now the Bible records in chapter 13 that Lot looked up at the valley toward the Jordan, down toward Sodom and Gomorrah. He saw this lush green grass. He saw that it was well watered. It was very pleasant to the eyes. And the Bible specifically says these words. It says that Lot chose for himself. And he went down there. But after Lot left, God told Abram, he says, now, you, Abram, you look this direction, you look this direction, you look this direction, you look this direction, to the north, to the south, to the west, and to the east, by the way, where Lot just chose for himself. And God says, Abram, I'm giving it all to you. The difference there was Lot chose for himself. God chose for Abram. Wait a minute, what happened to the guy who was worried about not eating enough? What happened to the guy who was worried about somebody killing him? In chapter 13, he's a new man. He's saying, like, it doesn't matter, you just choose whatever you want, I'll take what's left. Because God is with me. You see? He's now becoming a man of faith. I think that he looked back at his experience in Egypt. And he thought, you know what? I trusted myself. I thought I had it all figured out. I was pretty smart. I had a plan, and it didn't work out at all. I was kicked out of Egypt. I was rebuked for being a liar by a pagan king. Here I am representing the true and living God wherever I go. And this pagan king has to kick me out of his country because I was dishonest. He says, I'm not going to trust myself anymore. I want to go back to just waiting patiently on the Lord. I'm going to wait patiently for Him. He is my defense. He is my guide. He is my Lord. He is my God. He's the only one I need. I'm not going to do this with man's wisdom. I'm going to go through this as a man of God. I'm going to keep my eyes on Him. I've had my eyes down here for too long. I want to put my eyes up on Him. He's the one that's going to be my protector and my Savior, my Lord and my God. Excuse me. So chapter 13, Abram learns how to put himself in God's care. I think sometimes when we reflect on our life, the mistakes that we've made, when we reflect on the situations, we can learn lessons from those, just like Abram did. But there's sometimes when the thing is right in front of us and we don't get it. We can't see the problems that we caused in our own life. I heard the story about an elderly couple the other day. An elderly couple, and the man was out driving in his car. And his wife was at home, and she called him on his cell phone, and she said, Herman, she says, I want you to be really careful now going to that next town over there, because I just saw on the news where some crazy guy is driving the wrong way on the highway. And Herman says, it's not just one of them, it's hundreds of them. Sometimes you see the problem is right there in front of us, but we just don't get it. The problem is us, but we don't understand. But if you think about it for a while, then you begin to understand that God wants you to see something here. God's trying to teach you something here. He's trying to show you something. Now, if we think about Abram's situation as he did, we begin to see that he is recognizing that the things that he did were wrong. And now he's understanding that there's got to be a better way. I failed myself. I tried. I did the best I could. I did the smartest thing I could, and it failed. And by chapter 13, he's now saying to Lot, you go wherever you want. I'll take whatever's left, because God is with me. I can't lose. I can't go wrong. God is with me. You cannot go wrong if you have committed your ways to the Lord. The Bible's promise for you in Proverbs is that when you commit your way to the Lord and you don't lean on your own understanding, that He will direct your steps, your path. That's His promise. I think sometimes believers today leave out that middle part. They say, well, I'll commit my way to the Lord and He'll direct my path. And then you start to plan what your way is going to be. You start to think in terms of human understanding, and you start to plan, okay, this I think would be a good plan. I think this, and then I'll do that, and then, oh wait, no, I can't do that, because if I do that, they'll think this, and they'll do this, and then what will I do? And then you'll start thinking in human understanding, and you try to plan for every contingency. But the big problem here is you don't know what the future holds. You don't know. Consider Lot. Lot leaned to his own understanding. You have to put that part back into the equation. Commit your way to the Lord and do not lean to your own understanding. In all of your ways, acknowledge God, and He will direct your path. In all of your ways, acknowledge Him. Don't lean to your own understanding. So if you're trying to plan things out by your own understanding, well, there's the problem right there. God says don't do that. How many times have you noticed in your life that the things that God does that really turned out to be the big blessings, you couldn't have planned in a million years? How many times in the Bible do you see that the great miracles that God did were never in a way that man would have done them? There were always something weird, you know? Okay, listen. You're fighting 10,000 of these armies and everything. I want you to take these lamps. There's only, a few dozen of you. I want you to take these lamps, go up on the hillside, crash these lamps, and then say, the sword of Gideon, the sword of Gideon. Okay. And all of these tens of thousands of troops are going to get confused, and they're going to fight against each other and kill each other, and you won't have to do anything but stand up there and watch it all. And you say to the Lord, yeah, that's what my plan was going to be, Lord. So. God does things in ways that are different than man. You know what I mean? He does things that are entirely different. And so don't lean to your own understanding, but that's what happened to Lot. Lot lifted up his eyes. He lifted up his own eyes. He looked out on the plain. He saw the things that looked good according to the understanding of man. He looked out. Oh, it's green. Oh, there's a source of water. Ooh, all the valleys kind of flow down to there. It's pleasant. Look at all that. I could just live there and just vacation in Club Jordan. I could just have such a... So he went down there. He chose for himself, is what the Scripture said. He chose for himself. Remember what happened later? God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah, turned it into ashes. It's no longer existing. It's all gone. It used to be the most beautiful place. Now it's the most desolate place. When you trust God, you are trusting the one who knows what's going to happen in the future. So when He chooses for you, instead of you choosing for yourself, you're not getting second best. You're getting the absolute best. And you cannot go wrong. God is now taking care of Abram in chapter 13. Abram is content. He's saying, God, Lot chose this, but I know you've got something better for me. Doesn't matter, Lord. What do you want me to do? God says, it's all yours. Everywhere you walk, as far as you can see, in all four directions, it's all yours. I'm giving it to you. And I think that God did that because Abram was learning to trust in God. God rewards faith. Now, I'm not a faith teacher, as some people teach faith. I don't believe in a prosperity gospel. I don't believe that you're supposed to use God as some vending machine where you put your coins in and He must give you whatever you select. I believe that God is sovereign, that He is all-knowing, all-wise, and that you are not all-knowing. You are not all-wise, let's be honest. And that He will take better care of us if we just let Him do what He knows we need in our life. That's the better way to go. And now Abram is doing that, but he's just sitting back in chapter 13. He's just sitting back and letting the Lord drive. Chapter 14 is something entirely different. Now instead of sitting back, God has put on his heart to go forward. Not just to go forward. They are shepherds. They are shepherds. He's got a lot of servants who have joined themselves to him. Let's talk about that for a minute. 318 servants who are able to fight. What about the older? What about the younger? What about the women who are not able to fight? How many people is there with Abram, and who's feeding those people? Abram was already living a life of faith. He was taking care of those servants. It says here he armed them. He was feeding them. He was caring for them. He was planning for them, and God was blessing him. He was doing this by faith. He didn't have a pension that he had cashed in. He didn't have a 401k plan or a mutual fund that, some hedge fund manager that was really good. He didn't have any of that. He was out on the land. He didn't know what tomorrow held, and every day was a new day, and it could be life or it could be death. But not just for Abram and Sarai, his wife. It could be life and death for the hundreds of people that were with him. So Abram was already living a life of faith, if you think about it. But now they took Lot. They took Lot, who had chose for himself And not only were the cities destroyed later, but here goes Lot being captured by a foreign army. And all of his family, all of his friends, they're all gone, and they're going to be slaves to this foreign king, this king from Persia. And so Abram says, well, I'm going to go after them. He doesn't really think about the odds. Think about this. All of these places that were captured, the Rephaim, all of these valleys that they did war, there was probably, historians say that Cheder Laomer probably had about 30,000 people in his army. But he brought 3 other kings. And that they say conservatively, if you kind of estimate that they were able to contribute maybe another 20,000 people in the armies, that together these 4 kings, 3 that came with him from Persia and the surrounding areas, Babylonia and all, that they came with about 50,000 people. And Abram's got 318. You could, right there, I mean, you can tell the difference, right? You know, can you imagine going to that king from Persia, and they're looking out, and his generals say, well, how many people do we have, General? And he goes, probably around 50,000. 50. It's always nice round numbers with zeros at the end. But you ever notice the guys that don't have a lot, they go, well, no, about 315 people, Abram. That's all we got. No, wait, I didn't see them. It's 318. Yeah, that's kind of like, you know, us short guys, when you ask us how tall we are, we don't say, I'm 5'9". We say I'm 5'8" ¼ it's 5'8" ½ Just a tiny bit over a half. I actually, if you round up, I'm like 5'9". Stuff like that, So, but we don't say things like, you kind of, when you don't really have all of that with you, you tend to be very exact. 318 people over here, 50,000 people over here. The 50,000 don't even know that Abram is there. He's chasing them. He said, boy, are we going? Have you ever seen those tiny little dogs? You know what I mean? The ones that fit in a coffee cup, but yet they think that they're a lion. You know what I mean? And their owner, they're like barking at you. Their owner puts them down, and they just, and they start chasing you till they hit the end of their leash, and then they're, and you're looking down like this, and you go, I could step on you just like a bug, something like that. That's the way Abram and his 318 people were, and they're chasing after these people, and you could probably cover about 20 to 25 miles in a day. Ask any Marine, if you're really on a hard march like that. But they cover about 125 miles. They go up north of the Galilee, of the Sea of Galilee, and what we say in Hebrew, Hakaneret, Latzafon Hakaneret, and they go north of the Sea of Galilee, and now they've come to these people. These people are camped out as far as you can see in this valley. 50,000 people. They're everywhere. They're like the grass. They're like the dirt on the ground. They're everywhere. Abram gets there. They're all tired. He's got 318 people. He comes up with a plan. He says, well, I think it would be wise to attack at night. People are probably looking out on the army of the other guys, and they're like listening to Abram, and they're going, okay. By the way, have you seen how many there are? Okay, we're going to attack at night. Yeah, don't worry, we're going to split up into 2 parts. Oh, good. Now we got half as many people trying to kill them. Okay. But Abram was trusting in God. Abram was trusting in God. He was a man of faith. He was saying, look, Lot chose for himself. God chose for me. Look what happened. He said, God brought me hundreds of people. I don't know how to feed them. I don't know how to take care of them. God's done all of that for all of this time. I'm going to trust in the Lord. The Lord brought us here. Faithfully, the Lord can do it. Now, the Bible in chapter 14 does not give us any details. It just says that, and Abram, so his group attacked them. and they got all their stuff back. Okay. Miracle, miracle. You know, stop, think about it. The lights should be flashing. You should be asking yourself, how did that happen? And the answer is 3 letters. G-O-D. You know, God. God did it. That's the way it happened. It was a miracle, and that's what God did. So, you know, sometimes we look at things and we have an opportunity to grow in faith or to shrink from faith. Make the right choice. Abram, the reason why he is famous in the Bible is that he was a man of faith. Genesis 15:3 or 15:6 later is going to tell us. And Abram believed God, and that was counted to him as righteousness. That's what it was. It wasn't that he was special. He was a man of faith. God saw this guy just keeps trusting me. So notice something now. In chapter 14, he put faith into action. He went and put his life on the line. Not only his life, but the life of all of his 318 servants with him. He trusted the Lord with all of their lives. Chapter 13, when God said, I'm giving you this land, he could just sit back and trust God. He said, okay, God, I'll believe you. Now God is stretching out his faith in chapter 14. He's saying, okay, you said you believed me. Now I want you to go and fight this army. And Abram said, well, it's a little different than before. I don't just have to sit there and say I believe you. I actually have to go somewhere and put my life on the line. But you know what? God, I still believe you. He's stretching him out. He's stretching out his faith. And that's the way it is God stretches out our faith. Now, along the way, after he got all the stuff back, he comes back, and it just has a few verses there where he meets up with this guy, Melchizedek. You may not know this, but in the Hebrew speakers will know this. You see, Melech is king. Melech is king. If you go to Hamelech David, that means King David. If you go to Malon Hamelech David, that's the King David Hotel. You say, Melech is king. Melchi, if you add that E sound on the end, Melchi means my king. My king. That's how we make a possessive form in Hebrew. Melchi. Melchi. And then the word tzedek on the end, tzaddik, is righteous or righteousness. So Melchi is my king, Tzedek is righteous. So Melchizedek is righteous king, my righteous king. Okay? Or my king is righteous, either way. So Melchizedek is his name, and now he is a priest of God Most High. He comes and he meets Abram on the way back. And I believe that he recognizes there's something special about Abram. God is blessing Abram. We know that God is blessing Abram because Abram is showing faith. Abram is trusting God. It wasn't because Abram was some mighty warrior. You know, I mean, as we get older, we might remember those times when we're mighty warriors, but as Clint Eastwood said, we're just legends in our own mind, you know. But maybe our body is not capable of cashing the checks that our mind is envisioning. Abram might have been a mighty young man at one time, but now he's older, and he's trusting God. Well, Melchizedek now recognizes that here's a man of faith. And he is showing us by his approval and by his blessing of this man Abram, he is showing us what's important in God's eyes. And what is important in God's eyes is not what you do, it's that you believe on God who can do all things for you. It's faith. By grace you are saved through faith, and even that is not of yourself. That faith is a gift of God. It's not of works, lest anyone should boast. So the fact that Abram is exhibiting, is showing this faith, shows Melchizedek that this man received that faith as a gift from God. Therefore, this man is being used by God. He's believing God, and he's going forward in that faith. He's not just sitting there thinking about it. He's obeying God. He's going forward. He doesn't care about the consequences. He's not looking at things through human reasoning or understanding. He's looking at things through eyes of faith. And remember what Hebrews says, faith is the evidence of things that are not seen. So you don't see the answers before you go. God gives you the answers just in time when you're already there. But you go in faith. And if you're thinking about you want to go on a trip of faith someday, but you have to have all the answers before you go, then you shouldn't be calling that a trip of faith. Because faith is the evidence of things not seen. It's the evidence, it's a substance of things hoped for. So Melchizedek meets him, gives him this blessing. And then later, we don't know anything about Melchizedek at all until you get to Psalms 110. Then God says to the Messiah, He says, I am making you a priest forever. He says, you are. He didn't say I am making. He didn't say you will be. He says you are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Oh, wait a minute. I thought priest came from Levi, from Levi as we would say in Hebrew. From Levi, all the priesthood came from the tribe of Levi. What's this Melchizedek thing? I mean, Levi was the great-grandson of Abraham. Abraham had Yitzchak, Isaac. Isaac had Yaakov, Jacob, whose later was named Israel. The 12 sons of Yaakov, or Israel, one of them was named Levi, or Levi. So a great-grandson, Levi, or Levi, was where the priesthood was going to come from. But right now, Abram, the great-grandfather of Levi, is meeting with this great high priest of God, Melchizedek. And God's saying to the Messiah in Psalm 110, you are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. And we find out later in the book of Hebrews, by Brit Chadashah in the New Testament, we find out that Melchizedek didn't have father or mother. He didn't have genealogy. He was this special kind of guy. Didn't seem like he had any beginning, didn't have any end. Some Bible scholars even think that Melchizedek might have even been one of those times when the Lord became a man and appeared to people. Yeshua had said in the book of John, for example, he says, Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and when he saw it, he was glad. And they said, well, when did you see Abraham? It might have been that time when Melchizedek met with Abram. We don't know. But he says to the Messiah, you are a priest forever. Interesting thing about that verse in Psalms, he says, you are. Wait a minute. I thought the Messiah was born in Bethlehem, hundreds of years later. But now in the book of Psalms, he says, you are? He's already existing. He says, you are. See, the Jewish rabbis think that the Messiah will be just a normal guy, that he'll be born, he'll live a few years, and then he'll die. He'll do good things during his life. Then why does Psalm 110 record God speaking to the Messiah and saying, you are, right now, you are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek? How is that possible unless the Messiah already existed before he was born as a child on the earth? He is the Lord. There is none that were blameless and who qualified to be sinless for the atonement for the sins of mankind. So God became the Messiah, and He came and lived among us and did what none other could ever do, and then gave His life so that once and for all sin could be atoned for and we could be restored to the kingdom of heaven as we were designed to live before God. So now all of these things with Melchizedek are there for a reason, and we're seeing these things now. But the interesting thing as we close up now That's what all Calvary Chapel pastors say when they still have 20 minutes more to go. In conclusion, you'll hear different variations 3 or 4 times of that, before he really gets and sits down, But in conclusion, things are being stretched out for Abram. He was called in faith. He went to Canaan in faith. But then he tries it on his own power. Then he comes back to faith. Now he's going forward in faith, putting his life and the life of others on the line in faith. But that's not the end of it. You see, because that's how God works with us. He stretches out our faith. It's not something that just happens one day, you're saved and go, oh, well, that's it. I'm going to heaven. So what do? I guess I just go through life living like the rest of the world. The only difference between me and them is I'm going to heaven. That's not the way it is. God is going to work in your life. He's going to stretch out your faith as you go. For example, in Abram's case, he's going to have a child at 99 years of age when he couldn't have children for the other 98 years. Now, even though it's impossible by human terms, he's going to have a child. And that child had been prayed for. It had been promised for all these years and everything. Then after he has the miracle child and the child finally came into the world, Isaac, then God says, okay, now take that child that I gave you, that miracle child, I want you to go up on this mountain. I want you to sacrifice him. Abram's faith is going to be stretched out. He's going to wait for the child. God's going to miraculously give the child to him through his wife that couldn't even have children, and she's now 90 years of age when she has this child. Abram is going to have his faith stretched from that, and then God's still not finished stretching his faith. He's going to say, now take your child and sacrifice him. And you know the story. God stopped him before he could sacrifice him, but he saw that Abram had learned to trust God no matter what. That's the way life is. It's a journey in faith because it says in the Bible that it is impossible to please God without faith. Without faith, it is impossible to please God, is what Hebrews 11 verse 6 says. So God wants us to be mature in faith. He wants us to grow in faith in our walk. Is that the way your life is going? Now, just like Abram, he was not one of these guys. I mean, we tend to think of these patriarchs of the Bible in the book of Genesis as these guys with just these white robes on and long flowing hair, and they don't really walk in the dirt on the ground. They kind of float about this high above the ground, and they're just kind of going forward. There's this glow, there's this halo above their head. That's how we tend to think about these guys. But no, they are just normal people, just like you and I. But they're normal people who believe God. And not only that, but they didn't just believe God once. They made a lifestyle out of faith. That faith became something, a work that God was doing in their life throughout their life. Until He took them to be with Him, He was stretching out their faith. So maybe you haven't even started on that journey. Maybe you had enough faith to believe that Yeshua is the Mashiach, Ha'adon, the Lord and the Messiah. But maybe that's all you've done with your faith. Maybe you haven't really stepped out. Maybe you haven't said, God, you know what? I've been living my life. I've been watching my TV programs. I've been shopping. I've been doing this. I've been, doing that. I've been buying stuff for myself. But God, what do you want to do with me? Make me into the person you want me to be. And God, even though I fight, even though I kick and I scream, God, just ignore that right now. I give you my life. You're my Father. I'm just the little child. You know what's best. Take me to the place I need to go. Take me there, God. Don't let me get in the way. Take me to the place I need to go. Make me into the man I need to be. Make me to the person I need to be. Make me someone after your own heart, Lord, like you said of David. God wants to stretch your faith out. You don't have to worry. He's going to take care of you along the way. You don't have to worry about being harmed or going without. The Creator of all things will be right there with you.